What's up, guys? Welcome to the Walk-On Warrior podcast, where we prepare young student athletes for next level success. I am your host, Coach Z. And just before we get going with our interview with our guest, Coach Steve Mooshagian, listen, hey, make sure you guys go to the Walk-On Warrior podcast and subscribe. We're dropping brand new podcast episodes every single week. And in addition to that, check out Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and we're going to be getting on TikTok and all these other social media outlets to definitely push our message in regards to inspiring, motivating, and hopefully getting, young student athletes pursuing or still pursuing that next level goal and dream that they have. All right. Well, listen, hey, without further ado, we got Coach Mooshagian here from head coach Ventura College, and listen, super excited to have you on, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Justin. Appreciate it. And my pleasure being here.
Well, listen, hey, I always like to start podcasts off kind of an icebreaker. And I was doing a little bit of research and something popped up. And me being from Oregon, you were able to, in your career, coach a couple interesting human beings that played for you with the Cincinnati Bengals. And I'm thinking about that. And there's a quote, I can't remember what it was, but I think it was on your Twitter, and it was mentioning that Chad Ochocinco would message you guys in the middle of the night. What's that about?
That is true. He would. Chad's an interesting guy. He's very dynamic, flamboyant, and everything else. But he would, and it started early in his second year. He didn't do it so much his rookie year, although most of the stuff he said as a rookie was, one-on-one. But his second year, when he had his first 1,000-yard season, he would call and say, "I'm always open." 7-Eleven, that was his big thing. It's just like 7-Eleven. I'm always open, and it continued on into the Marvin Lewis era and Hugh Jackson, and so then it became a national news kind of thing. So, but he's always been like that. You tried to talk a little details with him, and he'd say, "Coach, just let me get open. I can do it." And he's kind of one of those guys that, believe it or not, he was all about his feet, didn't use his hands. And I used to get on him about, you got to use your hands. They're just going to reroute you, and nobody can reroute me. So we always had those. And then we had TJ Hushmanzada that was with us too, from Oregon State, and he was kind of the guy that kept Chad level. TJ was really a smart guy. I mean, he's still an analyst on Fox Sports and still works out guys for the draft. Just a great human being. The funny thing was how I got to know both those guys. I tried to recruit them when I was at Pitt as the offensive coordinator, and then 3 years later, I got the chance to draft them with Cincinnati. So kind of a crazy story there, but it's always got some junior college to it, because both those guys were JC players at Santa Monica and Cerritos.
Yeah. Well, and that's the one thing about the junior college kids, or even a walk-on guy like myself. There's a little bit different edge with those guys, especially if they make it out. They're able to get all the way through the levels they've had to go through. There's just a different edge with those guys, and they're everywhere. And unfortunately, a lot of guys get overlooked. But so real quick, kind of give us a quick rundown of your story, so the viewers get a little bit more in depth of who you are.
Well, I've kind of been all over. Ironically, I played junior college football at Cerritos after getting out of high school. Played for the legendary Coach Frank Mazzotta. Had 2 really good seasons and had 3 scholarship offers. 2 of the programs no longer have football. That shows you how long ago it was. But I had an aunt and uncle that lived in the Fresno area. And so my dad read an article from Jim Sweeney about the small guy in football, and being a 5'8", 165-pound wide receiver. Those were a dime a dozen back then. I was probably one of those slot receivers that was 10 years behind my time. I should have been Air Raid, Wes Wilker era, I probably would have had a little more success. But I ended up walking on at Fresno State and then earning a scholarship and got to play with guys like Henry Ellard, still one of the greatest receivers of all time that played for the Rams. And I had a good career, and I got into coaching there, and I became a high school coach for a couple of years, and then Coach Sweeney brought me back over as a part-time assistant to coach the wide receivers, which grew into a full-time assistant, and then became the recruiting coordinator, along with the wide receiver coach. So I got to handle all the walk-ons. That was one of my jobs as a walk-on coordinator too. So I'm pretty good with NCAA rules, although it's changed every day. There's something new. And from there, I became the head coach. I took a head coaching job at Fresno City College, did that for a year. My very first loss was against Grossmont with a Keely Smith at quarterback, if you can believe that, a few years back. I wasn't ready to be a head coach. I didn't think. I still had too much. I'll be honest, it was too much ego, thinking that I belonged somewhere else. And I ended up, that's when my wild ride came, and I went to Nevada as the offensive coordinator. We led the nation in total offense. Then I bounced at the University of Pittsburgh, was there for 2 years as the offensive coordinator. And then I took the wide receiver job with the Bengals. I was there 5 years. Then I got the bug to be a head coach again, and I made an ego decision. And at the time, Sacramento State was not a very good program. It was a good program, but it was in a very tough league in the Big Sky. I thought I could have a chance to make it a Fresno State again. It just didn't have the same infrastructure. I didn't do enough due diligence. It's an excellent program now because they've built it. I can say that I was a big part of why they got the new facility and all that. And then we mutually decided to depart from one another, and I ended up down at the University of San Diego for 2 years. Some of the greatest times I've ever had coaching football was there, because the kids, they really worked hard. They were there for the love of the game. Most of them had better cars than I did, and already had a job lined up. It was the most beautiful campus I've ever been on. I can go on and on. Got to look at the water, and it just changed my whole view on football. And I said, you know what? I got offered the New Mexico State offensive coordinator job, and they were it was the 120th paid job, OC job, out of 120 schools, and it was like 120th in the nation in total offense. So it was like you couldn't go anywhere but up. But I ended up taking I looked, and I had a community college credential, junior college credential, and I said, you know what? I'm going to find me a junior college job between San Diego and Santa Barbara and stay put. And ironically, I interviewed at about 5 or 6 places. I ended up getting the Feather River job, which was crazy. It was out in the middle of nowhere up by Sacramento. And, I stayed there for a season, and then I had the opportunity. I interviewed at Ventura, and I've been at Ventura since 2010, and it's been a blessing. And I've had a lot of very fortunate opportunities in my life, and that's been one that just worked out to be one of the best decisions I made. But the maturity of it was, I did it when I was ready, and it was there was the right place at the right time. And I firmly believe God puts you where you're supposed to be, and if you stop fighting that, and you put your ego aside, and you keep the faith in Him and the plan, good things are going to happen for you. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, among other things.
Well, it's funny because a lot of people, they watch these games on Saturdays and they spend all this money. They stand in the stands. They're all excited. They watch these games. They don't actually know what goes into being a coach. They definitely don't know what it goes into in all these coaches. They don't know their roads. They don't know where they've started and where they're at now. It's crazy what a coach goes through.
It really is. I've had people at season gets over, and they say, so what are you going to do? What do you do now? I go, what do you mean? They go, well, football season's over, so what are you going to do with your time? I said, well, I'm going to recruit. I've got a couple classes I'm teaching, those type of things. Oh, they don't really have an idea of how much time a coach puts in, and how many phone calls and text messages and DMs that you get a day, um, just kids asking you questions and needing guidance, or college coaches at the 4-year level calling you, um, asking you what guys you still have available. So it's a constant thing. My wife says it's 24/7. I leave my phone when I go to bed, and I'm going to actually fall asleep. I leave my phone downstairs, and then I get up, I have my couple cups of coffee, and I answer all my messages. And you get kids sending you stuff at 12:45, 1:30. It's like, what are they just got done playing video games and they're up? Some random question, but that's kind of the life. It's really not a job, it's a lifestyle.
Yeah. Well, I think I saw something recently that Nick Saban was mentioning, and he was talking to his wife, and we're talking about after he had decided, hey, I'm going to retire, that they were having a deep conversation. And the fact that he was saying that, he was looking at his wife and he was like, it's really incredible how you coach everybody. Well, you don't coach, but you're a parent to everybody else's kid, and you're really mentoring, you're parenting, you're coaching, whatever word you want to put in there. You're making an impact on somebody's life, a young student athlete, and it's so life-changing. And that's one thing that I really try. We go to these clinics, we go and we learn about X's and O's, but what I want to do here at the Walk On Warrior is dig into the depth of coaching and the depth of the kids that we are coaching and the parents, because it's, that's an aspect that is totally, for lack of a better way of saying this, that's the true X factor, when it comes to, in my opinion, being successful and building culture.
There's no doubt. It really is, about your culture, and you have to learn. Pete Carroll, who I was very fortunate enough to recruit his son to Pitt, and Pete came on the recruiting trip, so I got to know him and had stayed in touch through the years before he went to Seattle. I used to see him down at SC, but he used to put on this Win Forever, and he told me one time, you got to have what's his version of a mission statement, or something to, you're never going to be successful until you define what you're trying to do. And mine always came out to, to always compete, which I used from him, but one day, one play, one game at a time, because kids nowadays worry so much about what's next that they forget about to enjoy the moment, enjoy the ride. I said, football goes by fast. If you're really, really lucky, and the audience can listen to this so parents understand this, this isn't basketball and this isn't baseball. If you're really good and you're really lucky, you've got to play in 50 games your college career. And that's 12 game, figuring you're on a 12 game season. At community college, you get 10 games, and then you get your bowl games and your playoffs. And so we always try to say our goal is to get 13 in. But, when I played at Fresno State and coached there, we had trips to Hawaii, so that could get you a 13th game. Or, we played in the Disneyland Pigskin Classic against Ohio State. That one didn't count back then in those preseason games. So I looked at all of it, and I think that I got 45 games in, because, when I played, there wasn't all those opportunities in the postseason. So I'd say the average guy probably is lucky if he plays in 40, but 50 is really a special number. You spend more times practicing and preparing than the actual games. It's not like 80 games of, basketball and 162 games of baseball. Even in pro football, you might get 20 games if you go all the way, and, you have counting your preseason. So, it's really important to understand that, of how much time and how detailed and how much work these coaches do. Because any successful head coach, you look at it, he's got to have two things. He's got to have a great wife, all right, number one, and number two, he's got to have great assistants. And obviously, if you have those two things, you're going to end up getting great players too, because that makes it a lot easier. So I
Yeah.
try not to sugarcoat that part of it. The assistant coaches are the lifeblood. Assistant coaches and recruiting are the lifeblood of a program. It's not X's and O's.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the recruiting. So a young student athlete, so you're talking about a kid that's a junior or say a senior in high school, um, getting him prepared for this recruiting aspect. If you can break this down in regards to what does a kid do to set himself up for this recruiting, whether it's a portfolio, social media, how does a young student athlete get the attention of you, coach?
Well, it's changed through the years. It's really changed, but in the last 4 or 5 years, Twitter has been a big thing. And they create obviously a profile. I guess it's X now. I don't want to get Elon upset, but I like Elon, so I'll make sure that I say X, and that's a great symbol because that's a wide receiver symbol, the X position. So I like it. Um, but I think it's very important to separate and make a football only Twitter profile. Don't put all that other stuff on there. Try to keep it as much about football and your recruiting and making sure that you post your highlights, keeping your highlights up to date. Here, I'm going to say this, and I hope I don't, upset anybody out there, but the 4-year coaches have gotten lazy. They don't recruit like they used to when I was a recruiting coordinator and I was a coach. They don't go out as much. They actually have analysts. They have recruiting staffs. They've got people that do all the grunt work, and then they get told where to go and to go watch this guy practice. Not every school, but the bigger the school, the more it is. But I think the other thing is you can't just randomly send stuff out. I mean, you've got to write a decent cover level. Dude, can you take a look at my check me out? It's like, I get rid of those ones right away. I want to know your name. I want to know where you're from, your high school, your graduation year, your height, your weight, and your highlights. Just a little bit about yourself, not just like, check me out, coach. I really want to play for you. Okay, you sent that to 2,400 other people. How are you gonna grab my attention? Because I woke up this morning and I looked at my email. I had 5 class of 25 guys. And I said, come on, I'm a community college. We don't even start looking at those guys really until, next season. We have enough. We're still recruiting to fill our roster because we have to go all the way because of the rules. We have to go all the way to August. And we're not anybody's first choice. Because everybody believes they're Division One. Then they get humbled a little bit and realize that maybe they have a deficiency somewhere. A lot of times, the only reason kids don't end up at the 4-year level is because they do have a deficiency. And a new deficiency is the transfer portal. So it wasn't just height, weight, grade, speed, a tweener, position wise. There's a lot of factors that go into why you are recruited and why you're not recruited. And you have to be able to sell your strengths. Let the coach figure out what your weakness is. And then hopefully a guy's honest enough to let you know. I still scratch my head and wonder, we've got 4 or 5 kids on our roster now that we wouldn't have got 4 or 5 years ago. And the reason being is the transfer portal. So you've got to do things that can separate yourself, because whether you're a high school student athlete or a community college student athlete, you're going to get recruited along with the portal. Portal guys are a lot easier because they're already in school and they can transfer and they're automatically eligible. So you're dealing with a lot of things. So you've got to go to class. You got to go to class you got to get your grades up. I always say you got to have the 3 T's, and this is really important, and I still believe it firmly. You've got to have a transcript, you got to have tape, and you've got to be on a successful team. So team, transcript, tape. And if you think it's all about you, because there's a lot of great players on bad teams, but it really helps when you're a really good player on a good team. Sometimes you'll get recruited heavier being on a good team with good tape and a good transcript versus, great tape on a really bad team, because then they're going to say, what's your level of competition? There's a whole bunch of things that go into it that a coach, and this isn't just me, this is just coaches, are you look at their level of competition? Who are they playing? I always tell our guys, they don't want to see your film versus this team. They're going to want to see your team, see your film against this team, one of the top teams. So all those things go into consideration, but throw it all out. If I'm a parent and you're spending all this time on these, on this trainer to work your, the quarterback to have the perfect mechanics, but you're not spending time on a tutor to make sure he gets his English and math done, you're kind of spitting in the wind right there. You need to have balance and quit having these kids just play. If they want to play baseball, they want to run track, they want to play basketball, let them do it. A lot of the injuries we see now is because we're overtraining and we're using the same muscles over and over again. And that's why there's so many injuries. And I think multi-sport athletes is another, I'm a firm believer in that.
You hit on about 5 different points that I was looking to talk to you about, man. And
I do that. I have a tendency to do that.
Well, and the thing is, you talked about parents, you talked about multiple sports. So when we put those 2 things together, first of all, if a kid has 2 parents, because like I said, I run into a lot of situations where it's a single parent and they just want their kid to be successful. And so they just, okay, well, the new trend is, hey, let's go get him a coach. Let's go in, an off-season coach. And they go and they throw and they do all these things. But, the one aspect that drives me crazy too is parents don't go and talk to the coaches at their high school or who's going to see them the most to say, hey, you know what are we going to, or what's the best way to put it is what's the projection of your young son going through and what do you project him to be? Because sometimes, kids will go from quarterback to receiver, will go to linebacker to fullback, and and kids develop and change in such a short amount of time during that time. And talk about parents not communicating with coaches when it comes to
100%. And we get too much of this. We've created this 7-on-7 society or AAU basketball society. I have never in 40 plus years of coaching, and I have tons of friends that are head coaches, assistant coaches at every level. We've never recruited a kid based off their 7-on-7 tape or what they do in 7-on-7. So let's just debunk that myth. I've never just listened to a personal trainer to make my decision on a guy either. So let's debunk that one too. The greatest measure is the high school football coach and what you do you're going to spend your most time there. I mean, I've seen guys that say, hey, I'm not going to go to lifting with my team because I got my personal trainer. I got to work out at 2:00. So I don't want to do everything. But that's a bunch of BS. You better do everything you need to do with your high school coach or your community college coach. And then you can do that other stuff. But that's where a lot of injuries have come in, was all that overtraining of the same muscle groups. And so for single parents, and I'm a firm believer. My dad was a high school head football coach and my mom was a teacher. So I didn't have a chance. I had to get in there and do my homework and all those things, but I still slacked at times. But back then you just kept you involved. You went from football to basketball to baseball, and you just did it year round. Nowadays, I do see the pressure. Mom's working an extra job. She doesn't have, the transportation to take you to all these things. And sometimes the money less spent is the better. Less is more. Spend more time with your open gym or with your high school coach or your position coach. Get your wide receivers. If I'm a quarterback, get your wide receivers to stay and go out on your own and do some player run practices or some player run 7-on-7s. We did that forever in the summer when you weren't supposed to do that. When I was playing, you'd get guys together and go play at the park. That's what it's all about. You don't need referees and you don't need all that other stuff. It's kind of like play in the street until the street lights came on and mom called you home for dinner. I mean, we've lost a lot of that. Guys are spending too much time understanding football because they're learning it from video games. Well, on Madden, this always works on Madden. Well, Madden ain't the real world here. All right. Let's put this. I have kids come in and they'll draw up this route and they'll show me the 4 receivers, what they're doing. I go, okay, what's the protection? What do you mean, coach? Well, how are you going to block this? How are you going to block this front? How are you going to run it against this front, this coverage? And it's like we're learning things the wrong way. And so if I'm a single parent, I would say utilize as much free things as you can and encourage your son to be active, whether he's outside shooting, invest in a basketball hoop or a pitchback, or bring his receivers over and feed them lunch so that you can throw a bunch of routes from the park after, hey, let's go work out at the park, and then afterwards mom's gonna feed us all. You get more done with that than spending $75 getting these personal trainers. And I have nothing against them if you can afford to do all that. But here's the problem is you got your position coach and your head coach having you do it one way. And now you got a trainer doing it another way. And you're thinking you better listen to what your head coaches and your position coach is telling you, because that's their system. That's the system you're running. When you go to those personal trainers, you're not running a system. So you've got to be able to, and you've got 10 other guys around you, not just a couple receivers that showed up that are, out there running routes, hoping they get recruited. It's a different world, but it's very simple world if you look at it and you just kind of fine tune the things that are necessary. I'm in the 4th quarter of my coaching. I'm hoping I go, till I'm in my 70s, but, I'm going to keep these beliefs and stay in it as long as I can until they force me out. But I think it's important as a coach. I do adapt to today's kids. I do adapt to the changing rules and all the things, from wearing wristbands to signaling stuff in from the sideline to no huddle. I'm a firm believer that the quarterback leadership has declined because you no longer have the huddle where you're breaking a huddle. Let's say, put the women and children to bed and let's go look for dinner, from the program. I mean, we don't have that anymore. So the quarterbacks aren't as much of leaders as maybe they were, in the old days, so to speak.
Well, I think there's something to be said for just somebody that just wants to show up and wants to work hard and go through the process and be a team player. And
100%.
And getting rid of ego. Well, you were talking about ego, but I think you were talking more or less from the coach's side. But when you're talking about ego from kids are getting their information from pro athletes. They're getting them from all these people that probably aren't the best role models. And to be a good team player, to be successful, obviously you got to have a good team on a football field, because if you don't, it's going to make you look bad. It's going to make everybody else look bad. And then when it comes down to looking at film right? Then you're not going to have a lot of film. You're going to be getting
No.
sacked, or you're going to be getting nailed, And so, I think there's definitely something to be said for not having an ego, especially when you're a young kid and being coachable, and when you're going through this process. Because, this is a great topic came to my mind, is I've had recruits come on visits, and I've asked them where they've went at other places to go on recruiting visits. And they said, well, I went on the visit, but I'm not going to go there because I'm better than, NAIA or D3 or whatever. And losing opportunities because of ego and thinking there's something that they're clearly not. Because a lot of kids, what is the weird thing we always run into? Everybody's a D1 athlete. They're all
Right.
Division One players. It's news to me. Apparently, everybody's a D1 player.
Yeah, there's 85 scholarships, at Division One, and you got 63 at the FBS and FCS, and 36 at Division Two, and then you take that, and then NAIA has some they can break up. There's none at D3. There's really none at some of the out-of-state community colleges do offer scholarships, but when you look at the numbers of people playing football, your odds are going to improve if you're one of 11. You hear the term 11 warriors, and the better the guys around you are, the better you're going to be. And they're going to hold you accountable. You need to hold yourself accountable. You need to hold your teammates accountable. So leadership is kind of, lost its way from before. But to me, it's trust and coachability. My head coach used to tell me this in college. He said, you got to have trust level, and you got to be coachability. You got to trust the system. You got to trust your coaches that they're going to put you in the right place. You got to trust yourself that you're going to get it done. And then you need to be coachable. So, trust and coachability is huge, and trust and love are the two common ingredients for championship programs. You got to love the process, like you were saying. You got to love your teammate, and not in that way, but you got to love playing football, because it's a very, very selfless sport. I've never seen a great quarterback that didn't have a great offensive line, great receivers, and a running game. So if you don't have those things, you're just another guy that's scrambling for his life back there. So surround yourself with good people, and then trust the process and do the little things and get your ego out of it. That's
Yeah.
my, to go along with what you were saying.
Yeah. So let's say a young student athlete has overcome a lot of adversity, overcome a lot of these things, and now they have an opportunity to put them. So now they're getting recruited, or they're getting a situation where they may be recruited. What's the most important thing you think that a young student athlete should, how about this? We'll go this direction. So we've already talked about a little bit about setting up a way to get exposed. So now you've gotten that exposure. Now a coach is like, hey, listen, come by. We want you to visit. Want you to come, whatever. So coming from a kid, student athlete's perspective, as well as the parents, how should you approach it going into a recruiting visit? And then also, what should you do? What questions should you ask? And so on.
Well, I think that's a great question, and it's probably got a couple parts. I think the first message that I'd like to give is don't big time anybody, and communicate. If you get a message, whether it's a DM, a text message, a phone call, return it. No matter if it's a school, you can't just rule schools out. Now you could say, hey, I'm a Southern California kid and I don't want to go to North Dakota or South Dakota because it's too cold. I can get some of that. But, don't rule anything out. Hear what they have to say. Listen to coaches, and then make yourself a list of 5 questions or 5 things that are very important to you in making a decision. Not as, Do you wear Nike, Under Armour, Adidas? What jersey number do I get? How many? What's your attendance? Because everyone's going to say, "Well, what type of offense do you run?" And then I'll explain it to him, and the guy's like looking at me like, "What are you talking about? What does that mean?" It's like, don't ask such generic questions. How do you see me in your system? How do I fit in your system? My skill set. What degrees do you offer? What kind of counseling do you have? A full-time athletic counselor? All those kind of things. Whatever it is, sit down with your parents and find the 5 most important things, because really, when it's all said and done, it's all about fit. It's all about finding the right fit for you is the most important thing. Because if you take a scholarship or you walk on at a school and you only went there for the wrong reasons, you're going to end up leaving. That's why we have 2,500 people, or whatever, 25,000 they'll probably get to in the transfer portal, because they went somewhere thinking, and then tough it out. The first sign of adversity, you gotta have some perseverance in this world. If the coach yells at you, it doesn't mean you should transfer. I mean, and the reason I say that about don't big time anybody, I have a great example of a kid right now that was getting recruited to a D2, and then the guy gets a job at an FCS school, and he remembered him from D2, and he did give him the time of day, and so now the guy's recruiting him at the FCS school. But I've even had some that have gone from D2 to FCS and then gone to an FBS school. And even though they were recruiting them at a lower level, you never know when that guy is going to, take another job. Or I've even had D2 coaches say, "Hey, I know you're a D1 player. I've got my buddies over at Nevada. I'm going to call him about you." And I've done that before. Because you developed a relationship. It's about developing relationships with coaches. Coaches move on. Don't ever pick a school because of a coach, even though a lot of us do, because they can move as easy as you can now. The transfer portal for coaches is just as big as the transfer portal for players. So don't big time anybody. Figure out what those 5 things you want are, and then it makes it very easy. You list those 5 things on a spreadsheet, you put your other schools on the top, and then you go down and put yes or no. Does this school fit in that? And you add up the yeses, and the one that has the most yeses should be your choice.
Yeah.
But then if you allow ego into that, it could make it a little more fuzzier.
Yeah. What if a kid's late in the game? Now, let me define that. So, for the viewers at home, we've talked about this a few different times on podcasts, but we're talking about seasons and recruiting, signing dates. You've got the different signing dates. Let's say a young student athlete we'll say in the springtime, past that second signing date. The kid's super nervous, doesn't really know what to do. What would be your advice? What would you say to a young student athlete that's kind of getting to that point where you haven't gotten signed, it's pushing the springtime, and a kid's just kind of down on his situation? What would you say to somebody like that?
Well, the greatest thing in the world right now is the community college, junior college level, and for a couple reasons. One is, while you're a senior in high school, with the new rules, you can still do what's called dual enrollment. And you could still be, if you're not a spring sport person, we have, 5 or 6 of them that are in our spring football class. They actually come over with a physical. We can, and take a 1-unit class through dual enrollment. They can actually go through a padded spring ball with us. Well, those same recruiters that were recruiting your school in high school are now coming by the community college to watch the spring practice. They're going to see you there against another level of competition. They may have had doubts about you, your size, your speed, but now they see you against college level kids. And we've had 5 or 6 kids through the years that went all the way through spring with us and never played a down and got recruited, without there. Now that's a selfish thing that a lot of.
Oh,
If you're really all about kids, then that's something you can do. The other one is to go to the 1-day camps, not a full, I know Fresno, San Diego, a lot of them, San Jose, they'll have a $25 1-day camp. And a lot of times I've seen guys go up there to those camps and work out with that position coach and do those drills. And those sometimes have become, I guess they're more showcases. But I think if you pay, the $25 fee or $50 fee, I wouldn't pay more than that. But that's more advantageous than saying you're going to go work out with this trainer that's going to go get you recruited, because he's selling he needs people. He can say, I got these connections and those connections. But unless you're right out in front of the coach and you can show your skill set to them, I think those are the two things that I would do if I'm not recruited, is go to some of those Division I programs that have those showcases, and then they turn around and invite a lot of other coaches. They're there. There's D3, D2, FCS coaches that are there. There could be, go to one where there's 20 plus coaches in attendance, and you get more for your money that way. And so those would be the two things. That, and go watch your community colleges locally, and then go see how many guys get recruited out of there. Do your due diligence, do your research. I mean, we've averaged 25, 30 guys a year that move on. We've had over 300 since 2010. So I know it gets done. There's a lot of schools that are getting tired of the transfer portal. They've been burned on it. Coaches are saying, we're going back and taking more junior college kids now. That's the new thing. So because that's what I do, because I've coached at every level. I'm just saying, if it's me right now in today's world, I'd take a serious look at your local community college or contiguous area community college within, radius where you can still drive there and live at home. I know some kids want to go get an apartment and think it's all great, but it's not as easy as it would appear.
Well, that's interesting. You bring that up because San Diego, I mean, the schools that play football, they're strategically placed almost so you can get there. I mean, you've got North County, East County, South Bay, you got City High. I mean, everything is right there. And so I always really, I really hammer the kids. It's like, listen, if you think that this is something you still want to pursue, or at least get out of your system for another couple of years and maybe potentially take it beyond that and develop, there's a school close by. Now, are they going to be the best school or whatever? Things change. It's a year by year basis or 2 years or whatever. JC, it changes pretty quick. And there's just so many moving parts and things going on that I think that, young student athletes, they think it's university or bust, which brings me to my next question. So here's one thing that drives me crazy, Coach. And if I was in front of 1,000 coaches and 1,000 parents, 1,000 kids, I would say, stop posting "I'm blessed to receive an offer" on your freaking your social media, because it means what, Coach?
It means nothing. In the old days, you used to get letters. You'd get letters. So offers are letters now. I've even seen kids that post an offer. I said, well, why didn't you commit? Well, it's an uncommittable offer. So what is an offer if it's uncommittable? Until you get a recruiting visit and get offered a scholarship face to face there by the head coach, any assistant can say, we're going to offer you. I have kids sending me, does that mean I got an offer? And I said, yeah, I can give you an offer. I'm a non-scholarship. All I can do is offer you that you'll get a fair opportunity. But it is gotten out of hand. I really do firmly believe there's more kids that like getting recruited than like playing football. If that makes sense. There's some kids
Oh
that
yeah.
play football just so they can get recruited because it's like getting a like on your social media account, or a
Well,
follower. It's that. But I will tell you one thing. We had a kid in the other day, local Catholic high school, 4.7 GPA. He was waiting to see if he was going to get into Stanford. Still wanted to play football, but realized if he got into Stanford, he probably wasn't going to play football anymore. Well, he didn't get into Stanford. He did get a full scholarship, or a really good scholarship, to like Loyola Marymount, but he still wanted to play football. So he made a decision. He's going to come play at Ventura, but he's got a 4.7 GPA. That guy could come play one semester as an NCAA qualifier, play well as an offensive lineman, and he could have scholarship offers in January for him with 4 years left to play 3. And people don't realize all those things, and that's why we're getting more qualifiers now. Parents have lost the ego of stating at the country club that my kid went to UCLA, or my kid's going to wherever,
great
USC.
point.
Now they can say, well, why? So you want to pay your extra $20,000 a year just so you can, hobnob with your friends, and they're going to take the same exact classes? And maybe at a community college, there's less students in the class and they get more individual attention, and everything is virtually $46 a unit versus $4,600 a unit, or whatever, $460 a unit. I mean, do the math. I think parents are getting smarter about that, and they're realizing those things, that community college is getting a lot better reputation. Now, if you got a chance to get a preferred walk-on, and our coaches always say that means you prefer to pay. But there are some preferred walk-ons, because the walk-on now is you can pretty much eat with the team, and you're going to get the same gear, and hey, I'm going to get the same pairs of shoes and my 3 shorts and my 3 t-shirts and my sweatbands. They're going to say Nike or Adidas. Hey, don't talk, dog. And it's not bad, but those are the majority of what's in the transfer portal. The people that went to took PWOs, preferred walk-ons, then they realized that it's maybe more than what they thought, more time than what they thought, and they're back in the transfer portal, hoping that they do get a scholarship somewhere. But it's a tough road. I'm never going to be negative about somebody that goes as a walk-on, because I'd be a hypocrite. We'd both be hypocrites. It's got to be the right fit, though, for you. And a walk-on in those days, or a few years ago, Fresno State was $199 a semester for tuition. So we don't really, now it's over 6,000. So, it's changed. And obviously with inflation and the way our country is, I'm not going to get political, but the way the things are going on in our country now, where someone will say something that, we have all these jobs and all this stuff and all that stuff. We all know that it's not easy. And it's certainly not easy being a parent, having a high school age kids that's looking into college. So you've got to really look at the big picture on everything. Put your ego out of it. Quit worrying about what they say at the country club or at your gym, or, let your kids live their life. Don't try to live your frustrations through them by forcing them to do something they're not ready to do. And now that's getting a little deep, I understand. And I'll probably get some people who think this guy's a raging, what, but I've been around long enough and I've seen it. And, there's nothing more than I respect is parents that, are not, they keep their egos out of it. That's a great way to say it. The parents that keep their egos out of it are the best parents.
Well, it's a really great point. And I think when we're talking about reality, it's what I want on this podcast or on this show and this channel is to really talk about the reality of it. Because when a kid ends up going to a college, then they kind of get blindsided with a lot of things, or they got told one thing and then they didn't, So I want it to be a situation where kids know truly what it is from the horse's mouth, because I mean, yeah, there's a lot of salesmen. There's a lot of coaches that are looking to sell you, get you there. And then if it doesn't work out, well, too bad. But
That's right. There's another guy waiting just for that same opportunity. And then the guy that sold you all that in January might not be there in July when you get there.
Yeah. Well, and with that being the case, it's especially with incoming freshmen, let's be honest. Student athlete, parent, whoever's watching this, listen, you are going to a university depending on the level, and you're probably holding pads. I held pads for about 2, almost 3 years, like solid. And I was still on special team, but you need to be open and let your ego go and learn other positions. If coach says, hey, you want to be on a special team or whatever, because that's the reality of being a student athlete. And that's what you're going to deal with is, you come on this campus and all of a sudden now you got all these moving parts and so on. And a lot of kids they think that they're the best because maybe a coach told them, maybe their personal coach told them, their parents, their girlfriends, whatever, and then they go somewhere and then they are like, whoa, this isn't what they said at UCLA or wherever. There's 4, 5, 6, 7 other guys in my position that I didn't even know were here. They're 2, 3 years in front of me. They've had this much more time in these off-season programs. They're just as good or better. What do I do now? Right. So
exactly.
Couple questions. So with that, coach, talk about how a kid deals with that and how a kid overcomes that, because a lot of coaches don't say, hey, there's kids in front of you. They just say, hey, we want to bring you in and you're our guy. And so how does a kid deal with that? Now he comes on campus. How does he deal with that sort of thing?
Well, it's actually really funny that you state it like that. I remember going into my head coach's office and them saying, you just signed 3 JC wide receivers, where are you at? And a lot of times if a head coach is like I am, and what I learned is be transparent, be honest with them and say, hey, we're going to play the best player. The best player is going to play. Sometimes a walk-on is going to beat out a scholarship guy, but not every position coach is going to like that. But it gets back to competition. Is everybody has this instant gratification. But I remember my coach told me this, and I wrote it down on a note card and I put it up on my bulletin board. That's how old it is. You'll never reach your full potential without competition. And that was one of the greatest things that I've ever been told that stayed with me through my career is you're going to have competition wherever you go. You could go to Mount Sac or Riverside or Cerritos and some of those bigger JCs. There might be 150 guys out there. There may be 25 guys at your position. You go to UCLA, USC, they'll have 105 on their roster, but you're right. They could have 7 quarterbacks and 4 of them are on scholarship and 3 of them are walk-ons, or 15 wide receivers and they only use 2 or 3 at a time. So you got to get used to it. I don't think there's anywhere you go unless you're from a small school that only has 30 or 40 guys on the roster. If you're only going to school because you can play, it's going to be easy. You're probably not going to play very long. You're probably just going to go play a couple years and then you're probably going to give it up and do something else. I always tell everybody, working for a living, you're going to have to do that sooner than you think. So you better enjoy these opportunities of playing and just being out there. There's something to be said about just being out there at practice and competing with yourself to get better and become the best version of yourself. Because that's really what competition's all about, is finding a way to become the best version of yourself. There always is going to be somebody that's better than you. You may not always believe it. I always thought I was better than everybody, even though I had I had 3 teammates that played over 10 years in the NFL. They were all wide receivers I was the 4th guy, but I never didn't believe that. I always took everything like I was the guy. I was the number one. And if you have the right mindset and you compete like that, then you're not going to worry about all that other stuff. All right. You're not going to go home and have your girlfriend tell you they should be throwing you the ball more, or they should be doing this, or your parents saying, we got to look for a new school now. And then you go to the new school and it's the same thing. All you're going to do is go again. And we got these kids now that I'll get from high school. I had a kid a couple years ago, was Utah State wide receiver, great player. And he couldn't decide after Ventura what to do. And I said, well, what do your parents think? He goes, they're not giving me any advice. They screwed me up in high school. They said they made me go to 3 different high schools, so they're not going to tell me where to go. And so I ended up being the parent for that situation. And he turned down a couple places to where he didn't have anything. And out of nowhere, God found a place for him, and he ended up at Utah State and, caught over 100 balls in 2 years. And now he's going to be in the NFL draft. So, and he's 5'8", 170 pounds. So there's a place for everybody to play. Just don't rule out a lot of them because your ego gets in the way or your parents' ego gets in the way. And when things get tough, get tougher. Don't just look to leave and transfer somewhere else. I understand if your coach leaves and you're in a spread offense and they come in, they bring in the wishbone. Well, yeah, okay, I understand that. That's the way it was back in the old days. But you've got to be able to, everything that really comes down, you've got to be able to compete and you've got to be selfless. And if you can do those 2 things, you're going to be fine.
So with all of your years of coaching and coaching at every level, or almost every level, what would you say the main characteristics of successful, not only student athletes, but successful people in general? What are the main characteristics that successful players, successful coaches, successful people, what do they have?
Being selfless. Even the best all pros that I've been around don't think of themselves like that. They think if they don't continue to work hard, somebody's going to come in and take their spot. Every great player that I've ever had, or even good player I've ever had that. And they loved being part of the team. But it was work ethic and competitive attitude that they just, no matter what, no matter who you put out there, whether it was a 6'2" corner and you're a little 5'8" receiver and the guy's going to go in the draft and you've got to go one-on-ones against him, compete your butt off, and just enjoy the experience. But really it's selfless attitude, selfless competitive attitude has always been all the great ones. And it's never changed, whether it was in high school, when I coached in high school, whether when I coached in the NFL and everything in between. I've actually been at every level but D2 and D3, but I know a lot of people that have, and I know a lot of coaches that have worked there and played. Diego, so I kind of feel like I got a little bit of a D3 mentality with a little bit of a D2 FCS kind of all mixed into one, because it takes a special breed, to play for free. Do you love the game enough that you'd play for free? And you'd be surprised, even the guys that have the big $1 million contracts, they act like they're playing for free because they still love the game. Now, there's some of them that don't, that are all about the money. But once you're all about the money, or what do I get? How much money am I going to make with this new NIL and all the other things? Once you get into that and it becomes with the money, that's when it becomes a problem to me. And so you got to have selfless, competitive mindset.
So what about the opposite? So I'm sure you've seen plenty of real good talent, good ability, 4-star, 5-star guys, what are specific characteristics that make them fail?
100% the guys that's not me. I didn't do that. But coach, they have all the excuses. They have all the reasons why, and they blame everything but themselves. And a lot of times I always tell these same guys, the answer is in the mirror. And they look at me and they think I'm crazy. I go, the answer to your problems is in the mirror. Go look at yourself and be real about who you are. Because really, every one of us knows what our shortcomings are. It's just, do we allow ourselves, do we allow our ego to allow us to dig deep enough inside of us to know that, hey, you know what? I can change. And if I change, I can fix this. But all the ones that fail, because there's a ton of, I always say that the sidelines are filled with talent that don't get to the field because of it's attitude. It's 100% attitude. And it's selfish. It's being selfish. 100% being selfish attitude of somebody that it's not me. It's somebody else's fault.
Yeah. So give me a good story of somebody that maybe wasn't that kind of guy that blew your mind. Somebody that came into one of your program, whatever school it was at, where it could be Ventura, it could be whatever. Is there a specific story that just comes out of nowhere and is just a true success story? Maybe the underdog.
Without a doubt, Ronnie Jenkins, that I recruited out of East LA. And I'll be honest, I recruited him because my receiver coach at Cerritos was his head coach. And he told me, and I watched him on film, he wasn't a bad junior college player. I mean, he had other schools that were looking at him, but he wasn't, he was probably 5'10", he was probably 180, and he probably ran 4.7. But he could catch it, he caught the ball real well, ran good routes, caught the ball. So I ended up recruiting him, and we had 2 third-round draft picks that were there. And so he went out there, and the head coach told me, Coach Sweeney yelled at me, called me, "Hey, Moose, if you were working for the Oakland Raiders, Al Davis would fire you because this guy can't run." And so that, in front of everybody, in front of the kid and everything else. And then he went into, at the end of season 1, he ended up contributing, played on special teams, probably caught 6 balls and a touchdown. And he went in after, before spring, and coach said, "Hey, you're a great kid. You work hard, your selfless attitude, you're competitive. You're going to play on special teams. It'd be a solid backup for us." And the kid came out in tears, and we sat in the baseball stadium, and I said, "You just take care of you and do the things that I know you want to do. Do all the little extra stuff in the off season. I'll take care of the coach." And sure enough, he started playing, and he ended up finishing 4th in the nation, caught 76 balls, made All-American, never played pro football because he never ran better than 4.67, I think was his pro day. Still one of the best route runners and some of the best hands I've ever had. Ended up graduating and working for the Department of Corrections and Youth Services. And my story of helping him, he ended up helping numerous people and changed their lives because I changed his, or just believing in him. But Coach Sweeney came up and he said, "In my 40 years of coaching, I've never seen a guy work as hard and improve as much as Ron did." Now, he never once said, "You were right, Moose. You were right about him. Now, he never apologized to me, but he wasn't going to. But that to me is one of the greatest stories. And there's a few more things that go along with it. We don't have enough time to on this show, but I can tell you this, and we're still friends today, Ron Jenkins and I. And I always say, he always says how much you changed his life. I always say, you don't know how much you changed my life. So coaches can change players' lives, but players will also change coaches' lives. And if you're doing things the right way, it'll be a give and take world. And I think having a coach that believes in you is more important than anything else. And having a player that trusts you is important too. So it works both ways that way. So that's my story. That's my success story. I've got like 20 others, but that one, when I was called out in front of, and Coach Sweeney's voice wasn't exactly, he was up on the tower with a megaphone. So I think everybody that was driving on Cedar and Shaw that day that could hear it too, along with anybody shopping in there. So everybody knew, and he sure proved him wrong. Yeah. But in a good way, never disrespectful, just put his head down and went to work.
Well, I think that's a really important story that doesn't get out. And there's thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of those stories that are super inspiring, especially for a young student athlete that may be undersized or whatever. And then they have a parent, they have a coach, they have somebody. And you hear this a lot from kids with coaches. And it's funny we're talking about this. I had a young student athlete. It was talking about something, and he started talking about how he's had coaches in the past just tell him he's not good enough, or all these different. It's like, I don't understand. It's probably more ego with a coach by that point in time, just telling him, well, you're not good enough, you're never going to play, or whatever. I've never looked at coaching in that aspect. There's always something that a young student athlete can offer in some capacity. I always think that the coolest thing I ever see is when I see the star quarterback, the success stories or something where somebody is on Instagram and they post a picture of the star quarterback. He's over eating, like say he's visiting a school and he's sitting with, the outcast kid. They're eating over here because nobody will sit with the kid. And now they have a relationship. And then the next day, all of a sudden, everybody wants to be the kid's friend. It's like,
without a doubt. It's relationships are really, really the key. And just to go back on Ron, he is now coaching at LA Southwest Community College now that he's retired from the Department of Corrections. But he would be a great guy to have on your show someday too, because he has a bunch of stories. Lost 4 of his brothers to gang-related murders. So for him to get out of South Central Los Angeles and do the things he did, that's what I said. The story even has more unbelievable parts to it. But you're right. It's just showing somebody. Every kid has value. Every kid in your program brings value, and you just have to find what that is. Whether it's special teams, whether it's just being the scout team player of the year, for my 5'10", 245-pound third string center, snapped every ball. Jacob Bazuna snapped every single ball for the scout team against our defense. And he did get a chance to get to play a lot too. Was a letterman for us and got into some games, and one of the greatest kids in the world, and he'll be there every day, and he works hard, never misses. You don't even know he's there, but he has value, and he may never play beyond the 2 years at community college, but I guarantee he's going to be successful in life because he has the right mindset and the right attitude, and he's selfless. And those kind of guys go a long way in this world.
Well, before I get you out of here, I got to always, I call it the hot seat, but I always got one of those things where we got to ask you some questions that may be a little bit off the wall. And And to start it off, I know people are going to drive me crazy if I don't ask you, and I'm sure you get this all the time, but with your time with the Bengals, was there ever a bus trip? Was there ever an overnighter? Was there ever anything that was off the wall different or funny or something like that that you could share with everybody?
Sure.
I know you do.
But back to Chad Johnson. Now, somehow or another, I don't know, he had this God, it was a Cadillac Escalade truck. All right. And we're having our Friday night meetings, and he goes over to never one Lytle place where he had this little apartment. He was very cheap too. So he wasn't very flamboyant money wise. He actually leaves the car running because it's cold, and he runs up because he forgot his playbook. He runs up, he closes the door, but somehow or another the door locks. This is old enough to know that happened. The car's running, but it's locked. So he calls me and he goes, "Coach, I don't know what to do. I'm going to be late to the meeting. I'm going to get fined. I'm going to do all this stuff." And I go, "Well, what's the problem?" He goes, "I closed the door with the car running and I can't get back in." And I thought to myself, nobody in their right mind could ever do. How did you do this? So I said, "Don't worry about it. Just call, whatever AAA was, call somebody that can get in there." And he goes, "Well, I might just let it run out of gas. I'm almost out of gas too, so it might just run." I said, "Look, just do what you got to do, and I'll take care of it with Coach LeBeau with you." And I went into Coach LeBeau and I told him, I said, "I've heard a lot of excuses. This one is so bad that I think he's telling the truth." And sure enough, he goes, "Steve, I'm not gonna fine him. I actually feel bad for him." And he was just a rookie, but honest to God, truth, didn't get fined. But that was a first for me, and I've never had a crazier story than that.
Aside from Ventura, what's your favorite coaching stop?
Well, obviously, my first one being at my alma mater at Fresno State was a blast because we were really good and beat a lot of good teams. But I'm telling you, my 2 years at University of San Diego was probably some of the most fun that I ever had coaching. It seems like really, I mean, the 97 team, it's really teams more. The 97 team at Pitt that we went to the Liberty Bowl was huge. There's different 92 team at Fresno State when we beat USC in the Freedom Bowl. Beating UC Davis in 2008 at University of San Diego was huge. I mean, it's really about teams because you have so many new different people. But San Diego as a whole was a blast to coach at during that time of my life. Loved my time at Fresno State too, but Ventura's been a blast too. If you ask me about playing, I'm going to tell you my 2 years at Cerritos College were my favorite times playing college football.
Yeah. So who has better Mexican food, Ventura, or where has better Mexican food, Ventura or San Diego?
Oh, geez, that's like total toughness right there because we have Ventura and Oxnard. But Old Town San Diego, I mean, that's like, I don't know if you can compare that with anything. But I'm telling you what, Ventura and Oxnard both have great Mexican food. But Old Town San Diego and some of the mom and pop stores throughout San Diego County, it's going to be tough to beat that.
Well, listen, I've actually been to Oxnard. I'm a Cowboys fan, so I've been up there one time, but I've never been to Ventura, so I might have to come up there and visit you, pick your brain, hang out for a weekend or something.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Yes, it's been kind of cool because we had the Rams at Thousand Oaks near Cal Lutheran, and then I've gone over and watched the Cowboys a few times there in Oxnard. So, yeah, we do get a lot of the summer pro football. We do get a lot of that vibe from those two programs.
So what's tougher? So you've coached in the state championship game, right?
Yes.
Okay. I thought so. I just wanted to make sure. You've been in it a couple times. I know you've been in the Southern California Championship many times.
Yeah,
But.
yeah. And the funniest part of it was the first or second year they decided to have it at a neutral site. So we were the home team in Sacramento. So I always laughed. I had to drive 10 hours to get home field advantage and play Laney, who was coming
Right.
over from Oakland. It wasn't even an hour and a half, 2 hours. So
Right.
it was an oxymoron. Didn't make any sense. Now we're switching it back and forth between the South and the North, but
Yeah.
that made it for a very tough situation.
So is it tougher to call plays in a championship game or propose to your wife?
Definitely proposing to my wife was tougher because there was no referees around, but to save me. But no timeouts.
You're
No
like,
2 minute.
hold
No
on.
2 minute warning. Yeah, and community college gets the two. We're bringing back the two. We get a 2 minute warning this year too. See, I had no 2 minute warning, so I needed that. But no, proposing to a wife for sure. That and leaving things around, and she getting on me about it. But you know what? Coaches' wives are tough, man. They're tough.
Yeah. Well, that's the real up-tempo offense right there, times 10.
100%.
And then last question before I get you out of here. Coach, if you could do it again, player and coach, what would you do differently?
Wow, that's a great question. I don't know that I'd do anything different as a player other than try to earlier on really focus on diet and exercise a little bit more. I don't think during the when I was growing up that there was as many chemicals and things in food and additives as there are now. I think if I was today in today's world, I'd watch what I was eating a little bit more, probably do a little more. And I love going to the gym and I loved lifting weights, but I didn't figure out how to lift weights until, I was at Cerritos. So I'd probably do a little bit more and then try to my parents, I don't know if I could get any different genes. I don't know if I really could do anything different when you're 5'7", 5'8", 5'9" through the years. I guess I could have got just a little bit bigger and a little bit faster, but it wouldn't have changed too much, I don't think. Coaching wise, probably doing a little more due diligence on some things and not making ego choices and having faith that you are where you're supposed to be. People always talk about, faith, family, and football, and probably just making sure that I kept it in that order. That there was a few times in my career when it went football, family, faith, or football, faith, family. And probably for the most part, I think I did a good job of being a dad. Probably could have been a better husband at times. And probably could have just done a little more research and due diligence and not just, make ego decisions. But I look at what you have to do nowadays. You could get on social media and find five different versions of what you're looking for. I mean, you can find information whether you want it to be positive or negative for this guy or that guy or this school or that school, as easy as can be now. So I think you just got to keep the faith, do your due diligence. I probably would have done a better job at certain times of that would be it. But I have no regrets. No regrets.
No, and that's great. And listen, I really appreciate the fact that you're a faith-based guy, and I think that's super important. And I think we've got.
Uh-oh. Did I not pay my Wi-Fi bill, or did we go over and?
Yeah. So, I lost you for a second. No, I just think that's. Do you got me?
Yes, now I do.
Okay. But I'll wrap it up like this. I really appreciate the fact that, you're a faith-based guy, and that's something that we've definitely lost. I think it's really important, especially with young student athletes, especially come from hard areas, hard situations, parents trying to deal with their kids, and truly building a relationship with you. And it makes it easier for, them to make that transition to come and be around a coach like yourself. And so, but listen, guys, go find Coach Moose. Go find him at Coach Moose on Twitter. He is definitely active on social media. And if you guys have any questions on anything, definitely if you're a young recruit, definitely a young student athlete that's trying to figure out which direction you're wanting to go, especially if you're in the state of California, he coaches the best. And I'm assuming you might be one of the best. So definitely reach out if you have any questions on the process. Coach Moose, it's VC, what is it? WePlayHard.com. Is that what it is?
That's our website. And,
Okay.
Obviously Ventura College football. I think I'm Coach Moose on Instagram, and even though that's all ads now. And then just Coach Moose on Twitter is the best way. You could DM me or send me a message. I'll talk recruiting with anybody. If you ever have questions, it doesn't even matter if you play for me. I mean, I want to get to 10,000 followers. I think I'm like at 9,800. So there's 200 people listening. You guys follow me. I'll answer anything. I love football. I love, the process. And like I said, I don't know any better. I was a coach's kid. I grew up on the sidelines. So I'm as goofy as they come. But, I'm all about kids, and I'll help anyone I can help to make a difference any way I can. As small as it might be. Just a question, I'll be happy to answer.
And he's now an influencer, man. You get to that 10 G's, man. That's a
Yeah, occasionally I'll do a weather. They know me. Some people know me as Storm Tracker Steve. I'll do my makeshift weather reports on occasion. The weather's been so bad lately, I don't even want to get out in it. I'm hoping this is our last rain's coming through right now, and we won't have any more. We have a beautiful summer.
Yeah. It just came down real hard down here. But all right, guys, listen. Hey, make sure you guys go and subscribe to the Walk On Warrior podcast, and also, find us on our Walk On Warrior channel on YouTube. Listen, go find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that kind of good stuff. Listen, the content is it's not about us; it's about you guys. So we definitely want to get as much out there as we can, and like I said, we'll be cutting this up as best as we can. And like I just mentioned, listen, we'll leave it at this, but the way that I like to finish it off, Coach, is, you young student athletes, it's not about me and Coach Moose. It's always about you guys. Thanks for watching. See you guys on the next episode.
Thank you.